But perfect segue. Obviously this is what you do because that was a perfect segue, Tina. The nurse that got arrested. Can we talk about that? First, just tell us what happened, because this is something I've talked about multiple times. But when I say talk about, I really mean looking at the camera and talking to myself.
Hmm.
Um, and I've heard many different things about the situation. So why don't you just tell us the background situation of this nurse that got arrested, and then we can go from there.
Okay, so what happened is a nurse working at Vanderbilt University, her name is Rodonda Vaught.
Mm-hmm.
She was working in neurocritical care, and this is all the information coming directly from the CMS report. And anyone can go on Google and look it up, the CMS report, and you can read all the details of what happened. But this comes directly from that report and an investigation, a formal investigation that was done. But Redonda was working as what's considered a help all nurse on a neurocritical care unit at Vanderbilt University, and she was asked by a nurse to take medication down to that nurse's patient in radiology because her patient was needing a PET scan, and the patient was getting anxious and was not wanting to go into the machine, and so she needed something to kind of help relax her so she could get her scan. So Redonda went into the Pyxis to pull out Versed, which the doctor had ordered. So she went into at the time she had a orientee with her that was kind of following her around, and so she went into the Pyxis. She typed in VE, and the medications that start with VE came up. She chose, rather than choosing Versed, which probably wouldn't have come up in the Pyxis because that is a brand name and they are usually generic names that come up, but Vecuronium, which is a paralytic. It's a medication that's given to patients when we're going to intubate them because it paralyzes the muscles, and including the diaphragm, which is obviously the muscle we use to breathe.
Helps you breathe. Yeah.
Yeah. So she pulled out Vecuronium. She reconstituted it and took it down to radiology. The patient was in a room that's sort of like a holding type room because when they were waiting for someone to come down and administer the medication, and then once the Versed is administered, they wait about 30 minutes for it to kind of kick in. Then they come get the patient and put her through the scan. So she administered the medicine, and she had another task that she was supposed to be doing. She was supposed to go on down to the emergency room to do something like insert an NG tube or a Foley or something like that. So she administered the medicine. There are not computers down there. In order for her to be able to pull up that patient's medical record and scan the patient's armband, scan the medication, and all of those safety checks that are in place at the bedside that aren't down in radiology. And so she administered the medicine and then left, went on down to the ER. And in the meantime, the patient was not able to breathe because her diaphragm stopped working. All of her muscles stopped working. She couldn't move. She couldn't talk. She was aware of what's going on because it doesn't sedate you. It doesn't make you unaware. But she couldn't breathe. And so she became unresponsive. A transporter somehow saw her and didn't think she looked right and went in and checked on her, called a code blue. They came, they coded her, they received ROSC, but then was not able to
Keep her.
Yeah, they had to put her on a ventilator and send her back to the ICU, but she was no longer aware. She was alert and oriented before, and talking, and she had had an aneurysm, and that's the reason that she was in the hospital to begin with, a bleed. But she was alert, oriented, functioning, and so when this happened, she never regained consciousness, and they eventually, I think, a couple of days later, had to pull all of the life support, and she passed. And so Redonda was fired when the hospital, I guess, investigated it. They realized it at the bedside. Another nurse saw the vial that had been used to administer the medication, and they said, "Is this what you gave her?" And she said yes. And that's when they realized that she had given Vecuronium instead of Versed. So she was fired in January. That happened in December of 2017. She was fired in January. She started working at Centennial Medical Center, another hospital in Nashville. She worked there for several months. The nursing board investigated and determined that she did not need to lose. She should not lose her license based on this event. It was a medication error, and while it was horrible, and just a complete tragedy, and she will never get over it herself. They determined that she did not need to lose her license, and so they didn't pull her license. Then at some point in October, I guess Medicaid, Medicare came to investigate. They did a full investigation, wrote up the report. Vanderbilt was going to lose their funding, their Medicaid, Medicare funding, because of this event, and Vanderbilt had to make some changes. They have not disclosed what those changes were. But then based on this report, that the CMS report, the district attorney, I don't know how, somehow got a hold of this report and saw that this nurse overrode a safety mechanism. So when she pulled out the vecuronium, she had to have hit override. It didn't let her just pull it out, so she hit override. And because she did that, that is the only reason that I've ever seen the district attorney give for why they're bringing criminal charges against her. But because she hit the override option and then just went ahead and skipped over that safety feature, she's charged with reckless homicide and felony neglect of an elderly person or something like that. And she's facing 12 to 20 years in prison.
That's insane. So I need to know. So thank you. That was the most yes. Thank you for letting us know what happened. What are your feelings about this? Where do you come when you look at this? Why are you so invested in this situation?
Well, the reason I'm so invested in the situation is I feel like it affects nurses everywhere.
Before you continue, I say invested because Tina and I had quickly talked about this prior, and she said that you've been to the hearings,
yes,
the court hearings for the nurse. So why do you feel like it's so important that you go? Like, why are you invested?
Well, for me, the way that I look at this, for number one, her decision to override the medication is something that nurses do all across this country at hospitals all across the country.
All day, every day. Literally all day, every day. Like when a doctor puts in a new order and it just doesn't go through to the Pyxis and you need to give a med, you override the med because the patient needs the med. I mean, it happens every single day.
All the time, and in emergent and non-emergent situations. There's no reason. Someone should have stepped up. Someone at Vanderbilt should have stepped up and said, wait, you shouldn't prosecute her for this, because if you prosecute her, you're going to have to prosecute all these other nurses because everybody does this. But Vanderbilt doesn't want to do that, because then that's their whole reason. That's what they're saying is, well, we had a safety mechanism in place and then she overrode it. So this all happened because they were losing their funding, and their excuse is, well, but she overrode the safety mechanism, the safety feature. But we do this all the time. This is part of nursing. It's a system problem. And there was a problem with the way that nursing is set up at Vanderbilt and at hospitals all across this country, because we do this all the time. If we're going to be held criminally accountable when we override medications, then how about everybody stop overriding medications? What would happen then?
Exactly.
The hospitals would basically shut down, because the way the system is set up right now, you can't function, you can't do your job if you don't override medications, and everybody knows that. Everybody knows it.
I mean, the reality of the situation is, if we honestly decided to stop overriding medication, when my patient who has chest pain, who doesn't have any nitro ordered, who just came to the hospital, who doesn't have any morphine ordered, who have 0 orders, and I decided, you know what, let me wait until the system says I can take the medication out without the override, that patient's going to die. Many patients are going to die if we don't override. And I understand it's a complicated situation. And the thing that frustrates me the most about this story, I haven't kept up nearly as much as you, Tina, but I have kept up a little. And the fact, like you said, Vanderbilt fired her, and she was working as a nurse because the nursing board okayed it. They said that it wasn't her fault. Like, she could keep her license. It's her fault, but she could keep her license. She does not need to lose her license. It bothers me that Vanderbilt all of a sudden said, you know what, let's put all the blame on her the second their funding was involved.
Yeah.
But before the funding was involved, they were like, all right, she doesn't work for us, whatever. The second the funding gets involved, nope, zero blame was Vanderbilt. It was all the nurse's fault, which is super, 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 super frustrating. Can you give us an update? Do you know where they are in the proceedings? What's the situation? What it's looking out to be? Does she look like she's going to be a free nurse? Is she going to get, like, do you know what the situation is currently?
Unfortunately, yes, I do. She's been through a couple of hearings. She pled not guilty, of course. She's not guilty of reckless homicide. She's not guilty of neglect, felony neglect of an elderly person. So she pled not guilty to that, and they are having these discussion hearings now, where the prosecution and the defense are putting forward all of their evidence. And the next discussion hearing is set for June 27th at 9 a.m. And then I believe at that hearing, a trial date will be set. And so then she'll have to face a trial. It's ridiculous.
This is insane, Tina. This is insane.
Just the fact that she's being charged.
With the charges that they put up, reckless homicide?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that real? Like, that's insane.
Yeah, and my thing is, Q. When Joy Behar made the comment about the doctor's stethoscope,
yeah.
Nurses got so mad all over the country when Senator Walsh made the comment about playing cards. All those things are frustrating to nurses because they feel misunderstood and they feel like nobody understands what their role is and what they do or how valuable they are, and it can be frustrating. But over 600,000 nurses jumped onto a Facebook group for Nurses with Cards after that happened. And those people, that's a very active group now. They get on there and they talk about all kinds of things all the time. Some things are important, some aren't. They're just kind of like, it's just a place to go and chat with other nurses. Same thing with Show Me Your Stethoscope. Janie Harvey started that, and there's over 600,000 nurses in that group. I will say this about that group. That group does amazing things. In fact, they are supporting Redonda Vaught. They have helped to raise over $90,000 for her defense fund in a GoFundMe account.
Good
so
job.
It's a wonderful organization. So I want to definitely give them a shout out. But my thing is, why are more people not absolutely throwing a fit over this? Because everybody threw a big fit and everybody was posting about it, memes, everything. I posted about it. I was mad about it too, about the card situation. But we better be mad about this. This is serious because it will affect you personally. You make decisions every day at your job, and you decide what to do and what not to do. And if at some point you make a decision that costs somebody their life and you intended to do the right thing, but you just made the mistake, made the wrong decision, you could be charged criminally for it. You could go to prison. Is that what you want? I mean, why are we not all absolutely mad about this and doing something?
I'm telling you, Tina, I don't know when, I don't know how, but you need to be mayor of somewhere. You need to get into politics, girl. You need to do it. I mean, you were born with it. But I agree with you 1,000%. It's a scary situation. And it really is. This is one of them situations where it could literally happen to any nurse. It's not like, it's like one of those rare no, this could happen to any nurse anywhere. Like, literally every single day this happens. Mm-hmm. It's nuts.